Business of Property podcast. I'm Simon, and I've been investing in property for over 20 years. And if you're an active landlord or planning your next property investment or a property development, this podcast is for you. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'd really appreciate it if you could tell a couple of other property people about the Business of Property podcast. Today, I am very excited to be joined by Adria Tarrida, whose name I'm very sorry, I have butchered terribly. My pronunciation is not very good. However, he is the co-founder of Viability, which is a software system for property developers. And today we're going to talk a bit about MMC and what that is and what it means, and also about property development more generally and some of the challenges that property developers can face. But to kick us off, hello and welcome to the podcast, Adria. And perhaps you could give us a little bit of an intro to Viability.
Hi, Simon. Really chuffed to be here with you today. Viability is a software for property developers, as you said very well, that helps them de-risk and gather all of the accurate data they need and crunch all the numbers to get to a viability assessment. Things that take people about anything between a couple of hours or a couple of weeks, we can do it in a couple of minutes. So really helping with that workflow for property developers.
Fantastic. Now, I happen to know that Viability had a sort of foundation or background linked very much to MMC, which I should say is Modern Methods of Construction. But beyond knowing what the acronym is, I'm a bit hazy on the details. So perhaps we can start there and you can tell everyone a bit about what MMC is.
So MMC, Modern Methods of Construction, has been very well defined by the MMC definition framework that was put together by a guy called Mark Farmer a few years ago. And it talks about offsite manufacturing mainly. So it's methods of construction that involve quite a lot of offsite manufacturing, usually in a big shed. And it can take several shapes as well, right? And hence the 7 categories that Mark Farmer came up as part of that report, right? So the one that must be most familiar with people when they talk about modern methods of construction will be the volumetric, big blocks, probably 5 and a bit meters times 3 and a bit meters, loaded on the back of a lorry, manufactured offsite, then just craned into the site where the development's going to be. But there's six other MMC categories, so to speak, right? Anything going from panelize, methods, a bit like a Lego set that you get on site and you can put it together on site, going down to specific just pre-manufactured elements, things like just one that's very typical is bathrooms, especially when it comes down to student accommodations or to big blocks of flats, things like that. They could just drop in a pot with a bathroom already, tiled already, all equipped with the right pieces and bits. Robotics is also included as part of that, and additive manufacturing, etc., right? So it's all those methods that take some of the value of the pre-manufactured value, as they call it, out of the site itself and into somewhere else, into a manufacturing site. So it's been around for a long time, and you could argue as well that even an on-site traditional brick and block system has an element of MMC because the bricks are not manufactured on the site. There's a pre-manufactured value that comes in, but it's all about calculating how big that pre-manufactured value is, right? And obviously the biggest one is usually with those 3D volumetric pods that come already equipped with everything. We've seen even people putting sofas in them already and just dropping them on site with the sofas in for student accommodation, for example, right? So, yeah.
So, why would someone use MMC? What is, or perhaps was supposed to be? Because I know there have been some challenges in the MMC world. What was supposed to be the benefits of using that style of
my
construction?
question at the beginning, because I'm a bit of an outsider to this industry, right? We started the company a couple of years ago, and my question is like, why is not everybody using MMC, right? It makes a lot of sense in my mind. But the problems usually are, there's several possible problems with MMC, right? One is that sometimes you cannot maximize land values, i.e., especially with the volumetric units, cannot be the best thing for the site that you are trying to develop. Also, there's problems with insurability, with mortgageability. Sometimes there's a conception that it's a difficult thing. In fact, there are providers that do that, and they're very happy to certify those manufacturers. Ideally, the cost should be lower if you think about it, right? Because there should be economies of scale by manufacturing a lot of the same, having big volumes of materials coming into one specific site, less waste, massively less waste. It's something that it's very highlighted as part of one of the benefits of modern methods of construction. So it's well understood that typically 10% of the materials that are sent to a site, they're being sent to landfill eventually because of mistakes, because of ordering too much, because of ordering the wrong thing, whatever that is, right? So when developers do their assessments, they typically think for every 10 houses I need to factor in 11, really. So waste is one of the main benefits as well. The problem is that so far, at least in the UK, there hasn't been a single company that can beat the build costs on a manufacturing site compared to an on-site brick and block traditional construction. That's one problem. The other one has been that, and there's been quite a few high-profile failures. Ilke Homes, Urban Splash, LNG, yes, the list is endless, right? BT Passive, all of those were there when we started 2 years ago, and they're not there anymore. And the problem is feeding the beast, right? Having a pipeline that's robust enough that guarantees that when you are employing a certain amount of people, when you have invested a certain amount of money on machinery, etc., that you can keep feeding the beast with enough projects on the pipeline, right? Another element that we see, and especially we see when we run feasibility studies with Viability, with our software, is that what's very clear is that the time on site is much lower. So you can save on things like the cost of finance, on prelims, on many other things, right? So I think in the future, MMC will have a role. It has to have a role because, honestly, to deliver the objectives of the current government in terms of new houses, there's not enough skilled labor around. There's not enough capacity in the industry to deliver that, and there's going to have to be an element of MMC. And it's right for certain projects, right? Especially when it's very repetitive. Things like prisons, hospitals, student accommodation, big blocks of flats, right? There's a very emblematic case, which is the blocks, the new blocks in East Croydon. All those are made with MMC, with volumetric MMC. So there is a space for it. The jury's out. How big is that space, right? And if it can come into more single-family residential sort of developments.
Yeah, I think on the single-family and sort of the more customized side of MMC, there are options that aren't volumetric. I mean, you've already sort of mentioned some of the panelized type things where you can actually customize the design of the buildings a lot more, can't you? And hence you're not necessarily constrained just to the predefined cuboids that have to be fitted together and fit on the site. Although you are often still constrained by sites being accessible by cranes and things like that. But
correct. And it's still a problem, especially when you want to combine different systems, right? That hasn't been fully solved. There's quite a few very interesting startups that we know very well because we've been chatting to them, like Copy, that's trying to parameterize the different solutions that are out there, right? So you could combine, say, a really nice wall panel from one manufacturer with a roof panel from another manufacturer, right? So it's still there's still a lot of work to be done there. But yeah, you're absolutely right? They're more flexible, those systems. and they have a place as well in that sense.
In Viability's background, I think rather than just trying to save developers money or even time, which is more feasible, you were also trying to help with the environmental side of things. So where does that fit for MMC?
So that was our premise, right? Because of the less waste of MMC, because of the really cool things that some of those manufacturers are doing, using cross-laminated timber, using hemp, using really innovative systems that, for example, in the case of hemp, the carbon negative, even the panel itself, right? So that was our premise, right? Can we help a higher adoption of MMC in the industry by facilitating those initial feasibility studies, right? And by combining the demands of our target audience, which is developers, with the constraints and the particularities of each one of the manufacturers, we could assess a site and say, look, use manufacturer A or B, manufacturer C, D, and E would not be right for your side. And here are all the costs, and here's how the system's going to work. And hopefully giving a holistic view of the project in terms of timelines, which are shorter with MMC, in terms of carbon as well, which is going to be something that more and more is going to be required by law with the upcoming legislation, right? Things like that, and having a more holistic view of the different options rather than just doing a very arduous manual feasibility study with one option. And because you've taken weeks, it's like, look, I know it will work with this system that I know very well. I'm just going to forget about MMC, right? So that's one of the premises when we started. Yeah, but we can go into the details. The business itself has evolved a bit.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, with you gave a long list of MMC manufacturers who have struggled in the last few years.
That's a very kind way of putting it. Yeah.
So I think obviously having a focus on MMC has become more difficult for you guys as well over that time.
Yeah, the reputation's been tarnished definitely by those high profile failures, but there's been an element as well of talking to a lot of developers, understanding their challenges, and seeing that even before an MMC solution can be considered, first and foremost you need to have that viability assessment done it accurately, making sure that site is viable, and then perhaps the right sort of people will start considering other options, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think whether you're a developer who's considering MMC or not considering MMC, you have a lot of considerations and likely challenges when you're looking at a potential building site or plot to put your new properties on.
Yeah,
and that, I think that list of things to consider is very, very long. So I'm not going to ask you to list them all or for us to have time to go into them all. But perhaps you could pick out a few that you find particularly interesting or particularly important to give us an idea of some of those challenges that property developers do face.
Yeah, one of them is obviously the site constraints, right? And with biodiversity net gain, there's even more constraints added to the many that developers had up until now, right? Biodiversity net gain is a relatively new legislation that requires any developer to deliver 10% more biodiversity on the site versus the initial kind of base ground assessment, right?
Okay, but so I'm going to stop you just there quickly. What is biodiversity then? We've got to have a 10% gain in this, but what is it?
So yeah, there is two definitions of it: the scientific one and the one adopted by BNG, right? The scientific one is how many species of different animals or different birds or different plants, etc. there is on a specific place, right? And how they interact with it with each other, how they interact maybe outside of that specific site. The legislation biodiversity net gain, because it's so difficult to measure, right? as it's a bit of a fluffy concept, if you want, has taken a very pragmatic way of doing it, right? Which is to measure things in how many linear meters of hedges there are on a site, how many square meters of ponds there are on a site, how many square meters of grassland there is, right? And they have defined, I think it's about 18 different types of habitats, as they call them, and they measure those habitats in things like square meters or meters, as in linear meters, right?
Yeah. It's a
And
bit
then
easier than going out and counting the different types of frog or the number
absolutely,
of butterflies or
absolutely.
what have you.
And then just came up with this slightly random metric, which is called the credit. And then you came up, a unit, I should say. Credits come a bit later. A unit. um, and then say the site has 4.53 units on site, you need to deliver 10% more. And I made my things difficult by choosing a very random number. But yeah, whatever is 10% more than 4.553, right? It could be delivered on site. Ideally, it should be delivered on site, but the government as well acknowledges that sometimes it's quite difficult and allows you to purchase credits off-site, right? That's where the credits come in. But yeah, we have a tool in a partnership with another company called Gentian in our system that using very sophisticated AI and a lot of high quality imagery that we source, it comes up with a solution. It's like this many square meters of pond, this many meters of hedge, this many square meters of wooded area, woodland, right? And we can give at a very early stages an idea of the biodiversity in the place and also a cost associated to it. Still, you will need to send an ecologist to get planning before, but at least it could save you a lot of money by sending an ecologist to a place that's obviously very biodiverse, and it's going to cost you too much money to deliver the 10% uplift.
Yeah. It sounds fraught with danger.
It is. And it's a
constraint.
very new legislation. There's not enough ecologists. There's not enough people that really understanding the problem.
So, how about something a bit simpler? Is there something simpler?
I'm not sure there is. Really.
I
mean, our dear business angel, early investor, pretty much a co-founder, has likened the development process as a 10-dimensional chess, meaning that there's many variables, they all interact, you tweak one and the other ones move in the wrong direction usually. So it's a difficult problem to crack, right, with many variables there, right? But other things that we do, for example, to help developers getting to an answer much quicker, and usually it's a very quick no or a very quick maybe, right? It's never a definitive yes, because it's a very iterative process, the assessment of a site, right? But one thing that we are very good at is gathering data from multiple sources, and one of them is Padma, for example, that you're very familiar with, Simon, your other company.
Just a little, yeah.
And crunching that data, and not only just gathering that data, but really presenting it in a way that's a bit more than just data. That's information, that actionable insights, right? And one of the things we do, for example, is calculating the optimum sizes of the homes in a specific site, always respecting the minimum standards, obviously. But if you can build bigger than the minimum standards because the area is allowing a bit of a higher price per square meter, then we will tell you that, right? Exactly the point where the law of diminishing returns starts kicking in, right? And building more square meters is not going to give you more revenue. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense to build a 2-bedroom flat, 400 square meters, right? Equally,
maybe in central London.
Maybe, yeah, in very posh areas. And we will tell you that as well. That's the beauty, right? We should come with the right answer as well. The other one is optimum mix as well, right? Once you have chosen the types of homes or the sizes per type of home, which are the types of homes that sell better, right? And in there, we find surprises quite often. We find surprises like bungalows, for example, tend to be quite a profitable type of dwelling to build in many areas, mainly because there's a lot of demand of people downsizing. Those people have cash. They just want everything in one floor, everything easy, and they don't mind paying more per square meter. Then it becomes the most viable solution in some cases, not always. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
we
The
will tell
central
you that
London
as
being
well.
another good example where that one probably doesn't work so well.
Yeah,
That land value just being too high in some places to support having flat dwellings,
yeah,
as
yeah.
in
Funnily
single
enough, though,
story.
the bungalows have another advantage is that the build cost tends to be low because you're not building
Mm,
in. You build on just one floor, so you need to to do a second floor on top of the first one. So foundations and the walls and everything can be a bit lower spec. Um, and then also you don't have any common areas as you would have on a flat, for example. So everything that you build, you can sell in a way. You
hmm
cannot sell the stairwell on a block of flats, but you can sell everything that you build there. So you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised on how well they do in a lot of areas, really. But it's as again Paul Higgs, our investor, would say, it's horses for courses. You really need to go in the right area with the right scheme that optimizes that land value, right?
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And you mentioned just at the end there optimizing land value. And am I right in thinking that one of the ideas of viability is not just to say, no, this is terrible, or maybe this is not terrible, but also to sort of look at all the different options and really try and help you choose whether it should be a 10-story block of flats or a 1-story bungalow, and actually give you the numbers to back up that decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why we gather so much data, right? It's just, and data from also MMC manufacturers, for example, right? We still, at the end, say, look, this is the traditional brick and block solution, probably in terms of build costs, the cheaper one, but is it the optimum one for that site? Because you could maybe shorten your delivery and therefore reduce your finance costs by doing it with a manufacturer, right? Um, so yeah, we try to be as holistic as possible. Obviously, there's always things that we could do better, and we have, for example, grants at the moment that we're working with the University of Sheffield to produce automated layouts as well that could help us inform as well the optimum layout for that site. But yeah, it's a complex process, and I think we crack quite a lot of it at the moment, and we'll be continuing working to be more and more holistic and give you as many options as you can.
One of the, I think, things that always surprises me when I look at land that's for sale is you can look at a sort of farmland and, relatively speaking, it costs almost nothing per hectare, acre, whatever you're measuring in. And then you look at little teeny tiny plot in the middle of a town, and it seems to cost an astronomical amount of money. And I never really know whether that is a sensible amount of money or not. And
Yeah.
does as well as sort of optimizing the options, does viability actually spit out a number saying this is what your land should be worth, or how do you handle that sort of side of
Yeah,
it?
so we tackle that in two ways, right? One is we have an existing use value calculator. It's gonna the system once you outline a site is gonna look at what's on that site. Are there flats? Are there commercial units? Is it just farmland, right? And it will tell you an estimated use value, right? Um, that is the value that you need to then beat, ideally, in order to incentivize the landowner to sell to you, right? If you say on a plot you've got a house that can be sold on the market by 1.2 million, you will need to offer the landowner at least 1.4, 1.6 million in order for them to say, yeah, I'll sell you my house. Thank you very much. And the way that we calculate then, we're comparing that existing use value that we have calculated with that little calculator that we have with the residual value. We do a residual analysis of the site, right? We start saying, okay, how many homes do we think that we can fit on that site, and what's the sizes, and what's the sold prices per square meter on that area, right? And come with a gross development value, which is the top line, right? Say it's 10 million, right? Then you calculate all of your costs that you will have. Build costs are the obvious one, but also you might need to pay SIL S106 to the local planning authority, different taxes. You might need to pay for the biodiversity net gain, as we were saying before. You will pay for any consultants, any architects, any surveyors that you send to the place, right? And those will be all our costs, right? Then obviously as well, it's a very risky endeavor to be a property developer, and more often than not, they go bust, right? Especially when there's a downturn of the market, right? But you should, if you're clever enough, you should be factoring in some contingency, but also a bit of margin for yourself, right? And usually, typically, that's a 20% margin, because things go wrong, and you're going to start hitting on that margin, almost guaranteed, right? Even if you calculate the thing to that, you're going to start hitting into that. And then once you've deducted all those numbers from the top line number of how much you're going to sell those dwellings for, then you have what you can pay for the land, right? And ideally, that number that comes at the bottom should be 20 plus percent over the existing use value of that site, right? And that's how you incentivize somebody to sell the site to you, right? Saying, look, I'm going to offer you, instead of the 1.2 million that your house is, I'm going to offer you 1.6 million because I know I can make more money and you'll make more money. So win-win situation, right? The problem that you were mentioning about farmland is that typically all of that in a big city like London, or big cities like Manchester, Birmingham, you have the green belt, and it's a no-no to develop anything on the green belt. And now the new government with the grey belt policies, it's making signs that it's going to be slightly easier for those sites with less biodiversity, that have been previously developed, etc. You will be able to go through planning with that. If you notice as well, most of the local planning have areas of sustainable development close to the town centers, right? It means that, or adjacent even, not even close, just next door to certain things, filling some gaps. And it's areas that used to be green belt, but now they've been classified as areas of sustainable development, and therefore, it's going to be a competition between the main big, especially usually the big house builders, because they're big sites, 100 homes plus, to buy those sites, right? So there's a few in our neck of the woods, Reigate and Red Hill. Don't want to be cynical, but they're all in Labour voting and Labour or Green voting areas, not in the Conservative voting areas, but hey ho, that's how it is. And there's several areas of development, and those will go from a few pounds per acre to be worth tens of millions, right? All of a sudden.
Yeah, just at the stroke of a council's pen.
Exactly.
Massively increase your land value. Yes, it's a challenge to buy the cheap farmland that you know in 5 to 10 years' time is going to be redesignated.
Yeah. and usually the farmers themselves know very well that it could be redesignated, so they might not be wanting to sell you that one that's next door to a development, right?
Yep, definitely. So I think we're pretty much out of time for today, but thank you very much for sharing lots of information and background on MMC and viability, and also on some of the challenges. And I know we've only sort of touched the tip of the iceberg really on that, but some of the challenges that property developers will be looking to face and looking to try and overcome when they're considering development sites. So where can people find more information or get in touch with you if they would like to?
So the safest bet is to go to our website. It's viability.site. And also, we're very active on LinkedIn at the moment. A bit on Facebook as well, but mostly on LinkedIn. You look for Viability on LinkedIn, you should be able to find us.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. If anyone would like to get in touch with you, obviously they can use the details just given. Those links will also be in the show notes. So if anyone isn't sure of spelling or what was said or whatever, look in the show notes. You can get to Adria and to Viability there. And if anyone is interested in finding out more about potentially developing a site or about biodiversity net gain or MMC or any of the other things we've talked about today, please do get in touch with Adria, and I'm sure he will be very willing to point you in the right direction and help in any way he can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. Thank you for having me.
Very welcome. To everyone listening, I will speak to you again next time.